As you can see, we are on to lesson 35. We're going to step away from division for just a little bit and actually do some multiplying of 2-digit by 2-digit numbers. We're going to use an area model to help us with this. I'm going to draw your attention to the area model and how to break it apart. All right, imagine we're trying to find the product for 30 times 25 using an area model. So I could use the distributive property and break down 30 and break down 25. However, if I want to use an area model, I can use it by drawing an area model. I drew it like this because I have 2 digits in my numbers. So I take my 30 because that's a times 10, so that's a pretty easy one to break apart. I take my 25 and I'm going to split it. Who thinks they know how I'm going to split it? Right, 20 on one side, 5 on the other. Now we know how to find the area. We do what? Right, length times width. So if I take my length times my width, then I would end up with 30 times 20. And we're going to talk about using unit form because the unit form helps us to break it down easier. So we're going to start out with 30 times 20, which is the same as 3 tens times 2 tens. 3 tens times 2 tens is the same as saying 6 hundredths, because 3 times 2 is 6, and 10 times 10 is 100. Therefore, it's 6 hundredths. We're going to do the same thing for the other side. And if I take my length times my width, what will my multiplication sentence be? Right, 30 times 5. And what is that in unit form? You're correct, 3 tens times 5. If I multiply that, I take my digits first, 3 times 5, which is 15, and I have 15 tens, which is the same as 150. In order to figure out what 30 times 25 is, I now just take my two totals and I add them together. To figure out what my total is, I would take 600 plus 150. That equals 750. So I can say that 30 times 25 equals 750. Now my next step is thinking about 3 times 25 versus 30 times 25. 3 times 25 you should be able to figure out quite easily, because that's like saying you have 3/4, which of course is 75. I guess I'll just use my finger. My stylus tip is causing me trouble. And now we know that 30 times 25 is 750. What's different between these two numbers? You're right, this one is times 10. What's the difference between 3 and 30? Oh, 30 is 10 times 3. That is how they're connected. 75 versus 750. Nice. All right, let's go ahead and find the product for 60 times 34 using an area model. So of course, I'm going to create my box again. Who remembers what number goes here? Yep, it's 60. How would we break up 34? My idea too. What would I put as far as my multiplication sentence here? You're right, 60 times 30. Then we're going to use unit form. So what would that look like? Yeah, 6 tens times 3 tens. Then if I multiply those together, 6 times 3 is 18, 10 times 10 is 100. So you have 18 hundredths. And of course that looks like that, 1,800. If I go ahead and do the same thing over on my right-hand side, my multiplication sentence is 60 times 4. My unit form is 610 times 4. My answer is 24 tens, or 240. Now, let's think about 6 times 34 versus 60 times 34. Well, we found that 60 times 34 equals 1800 plus 240, which equals 2040. So if 60 times 34 is 2040, what's 6 times 34? I'll give you a second to work through that. Did you get what I did? 204. What is the difference between 204 and 2040? You're right, it's times 10. What's the difference between 6 and 60? Times 10. Now, we have something a little bit different to look at. We're actually going to look at this in the algorithm style. I want you to look at our problem over here. This is the algorithm style, and what we're doing is we are actually going to look at multiplying in partial products. So I have 4 times 0, which we know is 0. I'm not going to bother writing it because I know it's 0. 4 times 6 tens is 24 tens. Then I look at my 3. 3 tens times 0 is still 0. I'm not writing it. But 3 tens times 6 tens is 18 hundreds, because 10 times 10 is 100. Do you see the connection here? 240, 1800. If I add them up, I get 2040, which is what I got before. That's what we'll be doing today.